I want to welcome everybody here on this beautiful Saturday, at least in Shreveport, Louisiana, where we have over 1,500 people in the Gardens of the American Rose Center. If you have never been to the Gardens of the American Rose Center, I would love for you to come see it, because on May 7th, we're going to be dedicating the Gardens of the American Rose Center's newest addition, the Clockworks Gardens, the gardens that will tell the history of the rose in America. We're very honored today to have John Moe to be talking about climbing roses. And to let you know more about what's going on, Kim will be going over that in just a second. But I want to remind everyone about the wonderful Rose Atlas offer we have. If you have never been a member of the American Rose Society and you sign up for the very first time, you will, as a full member, you will get a Rose Atlas. If you make a donation to the annual fund, $150 and above, and you are an ARS member, you will also receive this wonderful offer, thanks to the Beverly Hills Rose Society and Dr. Tommy Carnes. Now, Kim.
Thank you, John. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for attending our webinar today on how to grow climbing roses by Mr. John Moe. Once Mr. Moe completes his webinar, we will go into a 30-minute Q&A session. If you have a question during the webinar, please post it in the questions pod. And then once the webinar is, he's completed his presentation, I will read your questions out loud to him and then he will answer it. If your question is not answered, it will be answered via email, okay? Also, one last thing, if you are watching this webinar with someone else, please post in the questions pod who you are watching with. Thank you all. And now we have an introduction by our American Rose Society President, Ms. Diane Summers.
Thank you, Kim, and welcome everyone to our program this afternoon. I am just absolutely delighted to introduce John Moe to all of you. I met John and his wife, Mitchie, many years ago at American Rose Society conventions, and I've just gotten to know them over the course of time and had some wonderful memories and experiences. So it's really super to have John with us today. John currently serves as the Consulting Rosarian Co-Chair for the Pacific Northwest District, and over the years has held almost all local Rose Society board positions. He has been growing roses for over 30 years and presently has about 300 roses plus 150 or so seedlings that he's evaluating in his hybridizing program. He's a member of the Tacoma and the Puyallup Rose Societies, and he writes a monthly column titled Ask the Consulting Rosarian for their newsletters. He is the past general director of the Rose Hybridizers Association, a Master Rosarian, and a horticulture judge. He has presented classes and seminars for a number of Rose Societies in Washington, Oregon, British Columbia, the Oregon Master Gardeners, and the Tacoma Home and Garden Show. John has been a faculty presenter at numerous Consulting Rosarian seminars, schools, and horticulture judging schools. John's honors that he's received over the course of the years include the Bronze Honor Medal from the Valley Rose Society and the Tacoma Rose Society, and the Silver Honor Medal from the Pacific Northwest District. I'm so glad that John's with us today. Climbing roses are always a favorite of our rose friends, and I know we're all going to enjoy and learn a few things this afternoon. John?
I'm sorry, John, we can't hear you. No. Make sure you didn't mute your computer speaker. He still can't hear you. Give me just a second. I'm gonna have John call you. 1 second.
Still there? No?
Oh, we could hear
No.
that. Yep.
Huh? We okay now?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm still good to go? You can hear
You're
me
good to
now?
go.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you. I'm sorry about that. All these technical glitches. Yeah. Well, I live about 25 miles south of Seattle, but I grew up on a wheat and livestock farm in North Dakota. Uh, I recall a few of the wild prairie rose bushes, which is the North Dakota state flower, on our farm that my mother had nurtured, but no other roses. After I graduated from University of North Dakota with an engineering degree, the next 27 years of military service found me living all over the world, again with little or no contact with roses. I really didn't have much to do with roses until I met Mitchie in Tacoma after I retired from the Army, and she had loved roses since she was a little girl growing up in Japan. Well, she was a Rosarian, and I became the gopher. First with her exhibiting, filling out the tags, getting bases, and whatever else not. So, of course, that led into building raised rose beds, putting in a watering system, constructing support frames for climbing roses. Anyway, then over the years, the number of rose beds expanded to about 13, holding about 500 or so roses. Then in the mid-90s, we met Dr. Neil Adams at one of our rose shows, and he's encouraging us to try hybridizing, which became a whole new challenge for us. So I ended up building a 16 by 30 foot heated greenhouse, which we still use today. Mitchie became very involved and made a lot of good crosses, had some nice seedlings. She was diagnosed with breast cancer back in 2002, but she continued her hybridizing for several more years and had some and did register about 35 of her hybrids. One of them, Seattle Sunrise, probably the best known of hers, is selected as a convention rose in 2006. And we did attend the World Federation convention in Osaka that year. That was her hometown, quite a homecoming for her after 42 years. And so at that time, she was still fighting the big C. And so it really slowed her down quite this last few years. We had 27 good years together until she passed in 2012. I've been slowly downsizing the Rose Garden some, and still make some crosses, but I've never had the success that she had. But the rose beds now, as Diane said, now I have about 300 of them in there. So, and a lot of them in the greenhouse for evaluation. Climbing roses have always been of interest to me, and just learning how they grow and how to encourage them to produce more blooms. There have been many questions about climbers that in my monthly Ask the Consulting Rosarian columns that Diane mentioned for the newsletters. And so a lot of research and experimenting and so on in answering those questions, kind of promoted the start, of this program. And of course, then it helps me keep up with the updates, so anyway, okay, let's get going here. Let me find the remote. Okay. So what I want to talk about, okay, whether they climb and bloom really depends upon how they're trained and grown. One of the most asked questions of our Rosarians at any function is how to prune a climbing rose. Well, we wanted to include some of the why does a climber grow like it does, and what do we need to do to make it more bloom productive. So follow along with me for a few minutes, and I think you'll see what I mean. Anyway, so anyway, also it's some of the typical acknowledgments, just for education purposes. And it's basically just a simple how and why about growing, training, supporting, training, and pruning climbers. So when most folks think of a climbing rose, they picture something like this. This is one of my favorites. This is Harlequin, also known as Kiss of Desire, from a Cordis, a very, very vigorous climber. And here's the, let me move this out of the way here so I can see it too. Here's a Rose Blaze climbing up on outside staircase. Another one growing up growing as a pillar. So you know, now when many get wonder why my remote isn't working very good. Now when many get around to buying a climbing rose and planting it, you know, they just water it and wait until it just grows, you know, up and up and up, and then just leaves out at the top. So the question is, why does it do this? Well, when a seed germinates and grows, only one growing point exists, and that's the apex or the terminal bud. And the growth from the lateral buds is directed by this terminal bud. Which produces a hormone called an auxin, which that moves downward in the shoot from the terminal bud and inhibits the growth and the development of the lateral buds. So this is called apical dominance. All this really means is that this top or terminal bud says to those lower buds down the cane, hey, I'm the top dog on this cane. You wait till I grow and leaf out at the top. Now, let's talk about this for a second. You know, the plant wants its energy to grow upward so that it could get more light to undergo photosynthesis. You know, can you imagine what would happen if this were reversed and Mother Nature let the lower eyes grow? You know, there would be not as much sunlight, photosynthesis would slow, there'd be no nutrients going into those upper eyes, so the cane would most likely dry up and die. Now, this is typical with all these plants, all of the roses, as you go out there and look at them as they're starting to leaf out, and they do it as they start at the top. Now, some people at this point in time, they get very disappointed at this stage, and they just give up on it. So anyway, it wants to grow, but then the leafing slowly moves downward to the next lower bud and so on, slowly down the cane. Most climbing roses need 2 or 3 years to build up the roots and the top growth to produce the blooms. Very little pruning during this time. Just mainly want to remove, you know, dead wood, some winter dieback, you know. But there's a better way to grow a climber. So let's take a peek at this. Okay. So here's your neighbor's fence. Looks pretty nice there without all those nice blooms. Okay. Now here's your fence in your backyard. Yeah, it's nice. It's kind of bare. Now, wouldn't this look a tad better if there were some nice roses like, you know, like your neighbor has to look at? Okay. Okay. Now to show you all of the following steps using photos would take a lot of them over a good number of years. So I'm going to use my imagination and my computer. I call it Imagigraphics, is my word, and create a time-lapse graphic of what we do. Okay. Well, but you must use your imagination and follow along with me, okay? Now let's plant a rose. And now just imagine that this is a rose, okay? Now stay with me now. Okay? Hey, so these canes will grow up and up, just like the ones we saw in the previous slide. Now, if we do nothing, they'll start leafing out at the top. Remember the apical dominancy we just talked about, okay? But is this what we want? No, not really. No, we're going to do something different. Let's string some wires. For the height of this fence, probably three should be about right. The plastic coated clothesline wire really works great. So what we want to do is to bend those canes down to espalier horizontally when they're young and supple. Tie them down with zip ties, pipe cleaners, soft twine, whatever you can fasten them to those wires. You notice there that I did have when they go out, let the canes go out as far as they want to there, and then you saw here that I did cut them off. Now you might see a bloom or two on this first set of canes before the second one grows. Okay, so here comes after some time passes and some more canes grow, then bend a set of these down and tie them like that. And then again, more time passes, do the same with the third set. Probably about, on a fence about like this is about, let's say a 5-foot fence, 5 to 6 foot. Probably try to limit the climbing rose canes to about 6 or so. Then you want to select the best ones and prune all the others all the way down to the ground. The ones you keep should be the younger green ones that are still flexible and that you can bend them. You want to spread an even number on each side so the plant is balanced. It's more important to train the climbers at this early stage so they'll flower really from the bottom to the top and not just only at the top. Now there are bud eyes along each of these 6 horizontal canes. Right? And so they say now to that terminal bud that's out here. Let's see if I can get a pointer here. So there would be you'd have they cut them off, and so this terminal bud now down here, he's saying, okay, you're not the top dog anymore. So what we're going to do, then you'll see that you can't hold us back, and so we're going to grow. So to clarify this, so when his cane is arched over, so the growth tip is below the horizontal, it loses its apical dominance, and a hormone then that was trapped in the cane, it's trapped in the cane. Now this will let those bud eyes grow, produce new flowering shoots at each bud eye along each along that cane. So this is the key then in getting those masses of blooms. Now they'll grow upward, okay? So let's take a closer look at one of those horizontal canes again from our drawing. Okay, so here it is here, and now let's change that to a drawing. Let's change that drawing to a real section of a cane. Here's a piece of it here. So let's say we just pick a little segment of that cane and then expand that up and blow that up. You can see that this one has you can see how they got the eyes there. So there's 2 eyes already growing. And what it'll do would be, that out there. Oh, there's your eyes. So what we want to do then on these is basically to prune each of these laterals just above that top eye. You want to leave 2 or 3 eyes. Some of this has to do with the spacing of your support wires. You know, if you're generally 2 is probably sufficient. Okay. So now let's go back to our let's go back to our time lapse view again. Okay. So in given time, what you'll have is every lateral on all 6 canes then is pruned like the one we just saw on this last slide. So leave 2 or 3 bud eyes, and this will give you the blooms on every eye from those 50 plus laterals on there. Now, can you imagine the blooms on this rose? There should be well over 100 once they get going. Can you imagine? That'll cover that fence, you know. But like I said, this is going to take time. This is why that's why I did it this way with a graphic thing to do that. Now, you know, imagine if you planted, you could even plant, instead of 1 rose, you could plant two of them there, and of different colors and side by side, and mix up the canes as you bend them down. I remember there was somebody I was telling out here that, you know, we've got the you know, with the Washington State, the Cougars, there's a kind of a red and white. You know, you could have those 2, or the Washington Huskies with their purple and gold, and have 2 plants there, and have the canes interspersed, and have your school colors on there with yeah. Wouldn't do so well for me for University of North Dakota with the green and white. I could do the white, but I don't know, the green would be not much. But yeah, anyway. So now here's you can see the upright growth from each of those lateral canes right in here. You know, you can see it right in here. You know, here's your look at the length of that cane and how they grow up, and how you end up with nice growth on the top of each one of those. Okay? Now, here's a photo taken in late February of a real live climber. You know, not a graphic like we just talked about. You know, everything is not as neat and straight as they are when we're in real life. You know, where those laterals are bent down and pruned. But here you can still see the support wires here. Here's one here, one, you know, support wire here, and there's another one kind of along in through here, and this one will fill out even nicely. So here's the same climber in June. So it's pretty much filled up that wall. Okay? So now let's go back to the slide. I went too quick here. You can see that. Okay. Now let's go back to this one that we looked at earlier. These were those 2 canes we looked at when we were talking about apical dominance. They have since been bent over and tied to the support wires. And now, and let's fast forward a couple of years. A couple of years later, they're still looking good. So you can see there are buds and blooms on every lateral. And there's a new cane down there in the bottom right, and that'll be bent over and tied to one of those other lower support wires. And let's go another year or so later. Now it's looking good and it's growing very well. So you can see what happens when you do bring them down. Now, and some other different supports. Here's some of the arbors at Highline Botanical Garden in SeaTac, Washington. This is the 4th of July here in the foreground, starting to climb up and over the arbor. And I believe that's Don Juan there behind it, climbing as well. The different ways of support. They can also be grown as a pillar. And this one is trained to grow primarily upright, but this one takes some training as well to get it to bloom from top to bottom. Not as easy to train as we just saw on the fence, and it needs some kind of support, else it'll just lay on the ground. So these canes are wrapped around the support. Imagine a barber pole, they're wrapped around it. And you want to try to keep the canes at about 40, no more than 45 degrees as you wrap them up. Train them to go on up. Now, if you keep them at no more than 45 degrees, the plant will treat them as a horizontal cane. So the eyes that are along those, can grow like we talked about earlier. Now then, and then of course, then you tie those to the support as you wrapped them around the wrap those around. Try to do that. Okay. Now, here's some pillar support structures. Do you want the support to be a decorative part, or be hidden or just to be hidden by the rose? Whatever you use, make sure that they're very sturdy. They may be holding many pounds of canes and foliage and blooms. They should be made of waterproof materials, galvanized metal, treated wood. You could use copper electrical tubing or whatever. So this one will be easy to make. Use a 8 or 10 foot 4x4 post and a couple of strips of lattice, preferably cedar, about 12 inches wide. Set that post firmly in the ground, plant your rose, and wrap those canes 45 degree or less, fastening as they grow upward, and wrap one clockwise and one counterclockwise. This will give you the lattice will give you something to support it. Here's some just some drawings, just some graphic drawings that you can see how the canes are wrapped around the support in both directions. They do exceed the 45 degrees, but this is just to show how they get wrapped around. But this is how you can end up filling the blooms from the bottom to the top on a pillar structure. Okay? Here was one that we saw growing in Japan during the 2006 World Federation Convention there in Osaka. And notice this support structure here. It has like two tall. It has some. Here's a couple of real just tall pipes in here, and it's got some. It's got some rings, attaching rings in throughout there. There were two roses here. Notice the distance they're planted from the structure. This one was well over 12 feet tall, and it was very, very attractive. Now, if the canes are too stiff to espalier, if it gets too old, and you just can't bend them, then this is another option to do it. It's not the opportune one, but you let it grow to the main cane grow to that desired height, and then you cut it off. Okay, and then what you do, you let what would have been your laterals, if that main cane had been espaliered, form the new horizontal canes. So just visualize the main cane it had been turned 90 degrees. And then what you would do would just be to remove those new ones. You'll see then here, if this had been laying down, these would have been the laterals, and then here's your bud eyes. Here's your new. So you'll have this new growth is going to form new laterals here. These guys that are on the bottom, they'll make a U-turn and they'll grow on upward. And then you just keep those you need and you remove the rest. And then those bud eyes and on those new horizontal canes will produce the new laterals and prune that just like you and any other climber. This would be, like I said, this would be one if you wanted one to especially a climber that's been growing for some time and the canes are way too stiff to do without breaking them. So anyway, let me give here's a practice. Go take a look at a practical example here. So here's the old climbing rose, Claire Jacquier, I guess is how you pronounce it. It was in his garden. This is in Tacoma when the current owner moved back in 1957. Now, as you see it appeared to have grown quite tall. And maybe it was up that tree or that post there and probably fell over and just sort of draped itself up over the fence to hold it up. A request from an email form on the Tacoma Rose Society website was read by Bruce Lind. So he and Barbara went to look at it, and this is what they saw. And being the super Rosarians that they are, they offered to help. So the first task was, of course, to string some support wires using some of this plastic coated wiring I'm talking about and some screw eyes. And here's Bruce there. He's stringing some wires, trying to work his way underneath all these things. They did some pruning first before they got started. And then they spread those canes out along the support wires, and they use looks like they use zip ties to put them in place. And they could have used most anything, twine nylon hose strips or so on to tie them in place. They left a number of canes, what it looks like about 8 or so. So here's Barbara pruning on some of the laterals there. Looks like she's leaving 2 or 3 bud eyes there, it'll bloom. In a short time, this fence will be filled with blooms top to bottom. Okay? So it's really starting to leaf out. Okay? And in here it is now in leafing out nice in early May. And then by here was June after a heavy rain. As you can see, the number of canes that it is a very prolific bloomer from top to bottom. Although it took quite a beating during this heavy rainstorm, it sagged some, but the support wires held it up. So anyway, it propped up some, but originally it appeared that everything was growing to the left, but they were able to move a few canes so that they would start to fill off this fence out to the right. As you can see, those canes were producing very well too. Now here's some blooms of Claire Jacquier. It's a light yellow noisette, bred by Alexander Bernet in France back in 1887. I just looked this up and helped me find, and it does have occasional repeat bloomer later in the season. It can get up to 25 to 30 feet and 10 to 10 feet wide, so you can see it's pretty good size. Or another thing you can do with some of these climbers or ramblers, you can just leave them alone, like this American pillar. This one is growing up by our driveway, and it's up 25 feet up into the tree that supports it. It blooms only once a season, but it lasts for about 6 weeks or so. Doesn't get much care. I'll toss a handful of fertilizer on it in the spring, but doesn't get any water. And I tell you that it slows down the traffic when that's in full bloom. In fact, I'm on a school bus route, and I've had school buses. There's just off on the right side over here. There's a stop sign, and I've seen school buses stop and back up. So the kids on the other side of the bus can take a good look at it. And on the other side of the driveway, I have this one, which is an unknown hybrid multiflora from our rose rustling days. That's another once bloomer. It lasts for 6+ weeks and not much care. They just grew up in some trees, but it makes quite a display. Now this was from a garden in France taken during the 2015 World Federation Rose Tour by Caroline Fredette out of the Seattle Rose Society. I did not go on this one, this tour, but I see here that this look like it's using the downspout for a support. Looks nice, but it's probably not the easiest to do any pruning on that one. Now here's again a structure along our driveway. I've used here's 4x4 posts in here with cross pieces, and I'm using bamboo poles for the supports. I grow my own bamboo, so I have the poles there. This again is harlequin on the left. There's a red one peeking through is Linda Campbell. She's supposed to be staying down low below it, but once they get climbing up there. Freisinger Morgan are out here in the middle. And then there's another, a couple other yellow ones in there. There's a climber Casino, and then on down to another Cordis climber on the end, Golden or Olymp on the far side. Just showing you some different support structures that you can have for climbing roses. Here's from the Imperial Palace Garden in Tokyo. We went over there for, this one was blooming, it was Rosa Banksii lutea, or lutea, I think. And you can see that they've using, it's kind of like a bench, which was a little bit chest high, and for quite interesting how they used the bamboo for the supports and lashed those all together. It was probably quite a lovely display. And this one was Rosa Lavagata growing on a privacy screen. So another use of bamboo. So and there looked about 4 plants in there. They were not in bloom when we were there. And out at the KSA Rose Garden in Japan, then this was a large arch of Francois Jurinville. There was face show standing underneath it to show the size of this thing. Like I said, we were there too early. We just went over there for lunch one time, and then thought we'd see a couple of rose gardens when we were there, but we were a little bit early. It'd be fun to go back again and see it in bloom. Now Faith has this. She grows one as well in her garden, and it was using a swamp willow tree for the support of it, and it finally grew so much that the tree could no longer support it at all, and it broke off at the base. So it survived quite well, and it spent most of that summer was laying on the ground, and we had to design an arch or an arbor to handle this monster. So here's what we built, and it's using some 4x4s and 2x4 cross pieces and a heavy wire called a hog wire. It was a purchase of an ag supply store. So it's about 5 feet wide and 7 foot tall right there in the middle. And so what we did was after we cut the tree out, and then we did some very heavy pruning on it, and pulled it up and fastened it up over on the canes. It's doing quite well, and it should be in full bloom this summer. When it does, I'll get some more photos of that thing when it's that way. You know, here's another interesting. This was at the Grillefparken in Copenhagen for the 2018 World Federation Rose Convention. So there were a number of these support structures here in this garden. Again, you could see, you see counting, you can see about 4 on there, 4 or 5 of them. Those would be quite easy to make too. They're just using a 4x4 post, and they were using, this appeared to be a galvanized pipe, or you could use electrical conduit would work as well too. And so you could adapt something like that to fit almost any type of climber, any size. You could have put as many rods through there as like, instead of using wires on the fence like we showed, then you could espalier your stems out and fasten them on those pipes. So again, it would be an easy one to make. Okay, so and you could make it any size, as tall as you'd want, and using, say, if you use 8-footers, 4x4s, a couple feet in the ground, you'd be up about 6 feet, about like a fence, or you could use the 10-footers and get them more. This was at the Queen Summer Palace Garden there in Copenhagen. There were this was an interesting one that standard roses were used at the time. All the ladies wore these big, large hoop dresses, and they really couldn't bend down to smell them. So, so there were dozens of these things in the garden, in the support stands, and they appeared to be made using some preformed rebar, and then the canes were espaliered out over the top, and then down and tied down, fastened down on the structure. Yeah, so they were quite attractive. No. How about this one? So this was from the This is a Northwest Flower and Garden Show in Seattle just early this spring. So it was, if this was a dress, anybody, you couldn't bend over and smell the roses either. So it was just one of the nice, 9 gorgeous floral mannequins on display there. So this one was just quite lovely. Or another interesting way to grow a climber. This one was also from the garden tour and back in the Osaka days. And it was they espaliered the canes out on the top of this instead of an umbrella on this picnic table, and they this one again was not in bloom when we saw it, but it was kind of an interesting, different way, quite spectacular in the summer, and maybe give you some nice shade or good sipping a cold one. So, but anyway, so back to go back to a recap on the whole thing. Large flowered climbers require very little pruning during their first few years. Mainly just you want to remove any dead or diseased wood. Some dieback pruning may be required, but you want to hold that as a minimum. In their first few years, you need to train them onto a fence or a trellis when the canes are still fairly bendable. This is needed to develop these long arching canes and a large root system then that it needs to support them. And try to limit the climbing rose canes to about 6 or so. And it's more important to train them at this early stage, when they're still flexible, so that they will flower from the top to the bottom and not just only at the top. And as some canes get older, they stop producing productive flowering laterals, so remove them at the base, let a new one grow. And now to make that happen, remember there that apical top bud produces an auxin. It's a hormone that inhibits growth of the lateral buds further down the cane. And when that cane is bent down, espaliered, so that the growth tip is below the horizontal, this hormone then gets trapped in the tip, and then the laterals will grow vertically from those bud eyes on each horizontal cane. And those on the bottom, on the side, you can see this one right here. He's coming here, and he's gonna turn upright. They'll do a U-turn because that's Mother Nature. They want them to grow upward. Okay. Now to get them to bloom, as the laterals grow, you prune them, leaving 2 or 3 eyes, depending on the spacing between the canes. This grower chose to have all 6 canes growing in one direction. It appears that the rose was probably planted in the corner of this yard, and it should work well, but it appears that they might have been a tad close with the spacing on them. Probably to be very difficult to leave a couple of eyes or more on that. So as this one should fill out and cover that fence from top to bottom. Okay. So from another interesting one, this one is, I hope that this has helped you a tad in your quest of continuing rose knowledge, or just for something of some of the rationale or reasons why they do as they do. This one is from one of the garden tours from the 2012 convention in Johannesburg. And you can see what they did to beautify that wall, and how they used that, made a checkerboard pattern with those canes. So obvious that this took them quite some time to do that, but you can just see what can be done. Okay. So with that, we'll see what kind of questions you have. Did I satisfy any of your knowledge or whatever? So anyway, so back
Thank
to
you so much.
let me
Thank you,
stop
John.
here.
Thank you so much on a wonderful presentation. Okay, now we're going to go into the Q&A session. And remember, it's only 30 minutes, but if your question is not asked, it will be responded via email. Okay. All right. So the first question is from Carrie Berry. I have some Canadian climbing roses. When should I feed them and prune them? I read not to prune them. Is that the correct way to do it? Thanks.
Can you read this, the beginning of it again? You're a little bit fast for me.
Okay. I have some Canadian climbing roses. When should I feed them and when should I prune them?
Well, it depends on locally as far as feeding climbing roses. They are big feeders, and so but what you want to do if you're planting some brand new ones, okay, as with any rose, you want to wait until you start till they've been leafing out and you start seeing some of your first blooms before you start feeding them. On pruning a climbing rose, like I said, those first few years when they're growing, we don't do much pruning other than do some deadheading and I mean, doing some dieback and a little bit of deadheading, because what we want to do, you want to shape that bush the way you want it to be. So let it grow and confine it. As it gets out far enough along out in your wires, if you got them espaliate out, and then trim the ends, and then that'll force the growth into your laterals. And so okay.
All right. Next question is from John Loretta. When watering and fertilizing my roses, I observe the concept of doing so along the zone of the plant's drip line. What is the drip line of a fully developed climbing rose? For example, 4th of July or Graham Thomas.
Well, that's an interesting one. I would assume that I would just by the drip line would still be, you couldn't do not like a hybrid tea where we pretty much know the width of it, but on a basically for a climbing rose, I don't know. I would go on out a good foot or so, 18 inches or so out from the canes out all the way around, a circle all the way around. Okay, and where you put your fertilizer down, and where you do your watering. Okay.
Okay. Next question is by Mr. Bill Dorn. Can you explain the difference between growing old wood versus new wood?
Well, the new wood, the old wood is from like some of our once blooming climbers. Okay, in other words, we don't want to prune those until after they have bloomed, and then they got the whole season. A whole, if they bloom once a year, then they got the whole season in which to grow and get sturdy and finalized, and get that bud eye in there, get that one growing. Whereas the new wood we're normally used to, like our repeat flowering ones, and so as we deadhead and we prune, then we get brand new growth and we get new eyes. It's just that pretty much where we talk about old wood is usually on your once blooming climbers, so or shrubs or whatever you have. And so it just maybe somebody else can answer that one a little bit more than me. What the difference is with the wood itself, other than the fact that it's just more stabilized and more it has a longer time to grow. So, okay.
All right.
Okay.
So the next question is from Suzanne Langois. Do you have any favorite orange climbers?
Any favorite orange climbers?
Yes.
Yeah. No, not that rings any bell with me. An orange one. I guess some of those red orange ones. I guess probably I have Autumn Sunset. I guess is probably one that to me it has some orangey colors in there for me, and so no. But there's one of the things though that was going along with this presentation, and that you'll see it on the website. Our national Consulting Rosarian chairs, Anita and Mike Eckley, have been collecting and putting together, along with Deanna Brunch, a listing of climbing roses for each district that do well, and the colors, I believe, of it. And that should be on the should be posted up on the ARS website shortly, where you can, which would be some input from each of the district Consulting Rosarian chairs as to some of the climbers that do well in that particular district. So there would be once that's available on the website, take a good peek at that one. Okay.
Okay. Next question is from Teddy Mower. Can you please elaborate on Don Juan? Is there anything special about getting it to bloom more with pruning and perhaps other care?
Well, Don Juan is a beautiful dark red climber. There again, kind of following the sequence of what we did. There again, if you can arch that cane over, you're going to take and force. You're going to force those laterals, which really that are growing vertically. We still call them laterals anyway, but and force the growth into that, and then by pruning those to 2 or 3 eyes, then again you're going to force growth out of those new eyes. So if you let it just grow tall, it will eventually, without arching it, it will eventually send out shoots from the side with blooms on it. But you won't get near the blooms you would if you could arch it over. Okay.
Okay. Next question is from Martha Negley. Any trouble with rose rosette when climbers go on the arbors since the mite drifts in the air?
Maybe somebody else can chime in more on that. We don't have any rosette. Haven't seen any of it up in this Pacific Northwest at all. So, but being that mite does float in the air, I would imagine that a climbing rose is susceptible to it as well, because if they're going to land on that, being they stand up and they're a little taller than some of the others, but I would assume that they would be just as susceptible to that as anything else. But we have been very fortunate. We haven't seen it here, so we don't have much experience in dealing with that. I'm sorry.
Okay. All right. Next question is from Sandra Phillips. How do you winterize a climber?
Basically, just like anything else, you can mulch up around the, you can mulch up around the base some, just so that you don't have so much damage. There again, you're probably gonna do some pruning on it in the fall if you have a repeat climber. There again, where you do your deadheading, and you can take it down some. If you have some real old canes, some of these you might want to cut out. But chances are you're going to have, as with 80 rows, you're going to start seeing maybe some new basils that'll be coming out from there at the ground level. And at that point in time, you want to decide, if you have some real old canes that are split and cracked, this is the time then to take them out and then let one of those new ones grow, to replace it. So yes, you do want to winterize those, is taking again and just throw on a few shovelfuls of mulch, and but I imagine that's about all you can do really with a climbing rose. You can't really, even if you're in a very cold climate, you still can't really cover it up much at all. So it's just it's going to have to take its licks, and you're going to have to take care of it in the spring. Okay.
John, this is Diane Summers. I would also suggest that when the PowerPoint is up that shows all the different favorite roses by different areas of the country, that might be helpful, because some of the colder climates, they have different roses that maybe are going to do well throughout the winter months, and be able, to take that colder temperatures, which is one of the reasons that we wanted to provide a variety of roses that work well across the country. So we'll make sure that everyone sees that link, and that it'll be on our ARS website so that you can look at that as well.
Yeah, on that, Diane, I hope that somebody from the northern part it does include William Baffin on that list. That I think that's one of those Canadian ones. It's supposed to take temperatures down to 40 below zero. So
Yeah, that's a great rose. Yes, I've grown it for a long time.
there you go. Okay.
Our next question is from Sue Dempsey. When growing a rose on a triangle type structure, where would you plant the rose? I wasn't sure whether to plant inside the structure or in front.
Oh, you mean like that one example I showed with a with a support thing? I would plant it right on the outside and the edge, and then so that you could get to it easy, and then let your canes wrap them around the outside of that structure, so that you got airflow inside in the middle to keep the disease down and so on, the mildew down. You want airflow in the center. I would plant it on that triangular shaped one like I showed there. I would plant it right on the outside edge, and then one of the corners, and then wrap around, as you go. Okay.
I have a question by Iris Hazen. When you prune the laterals, do they bloom again?
Well, there again, depends on the rose. If it's a repeat bloomer, yes, they do. Sure, they do. Because at every eye, there are, at every one of those bud eyes, there are 3 eyes in there. Okay. So you can get they can then you deadhead them, and then maybe that and then the other eye will grow. Okay. And it'll keep growing taller. It'll keep growing, and so and then and you'll grow, so as you keep deadheading and pruning, that cane will keep growing for you. Okay.
Okay. A question by Lisa French. Do you prune each lateral back every year?
Well, because they're gonna keep growing, and so you're gonna take them down to 2 eyes. Okay. 2 or 3 eyes. Otherwise that lateral will just keep growing, and you might have them, up there 5 or 6 feet or so.
Okay. Second question by Ms. French. Would you have any idea why my silver moons have never bloomed for 9 years? Pretty sure it isn't rose midge. Roses next to them bloom.
A rose that hasn't bloomed for 9 years.
Yes, sir.
I don't know if I would have kept it that long, but you sure it's well, I mean, even if it was rootstock, it would bloom at least once in the season. I don't know. Well, that one absolutely, that stumps me there. I don't know. For that length of time, there's something wrong with that plant to me. But
maybe I can email this question to you, and maybe you guys can elaborate a little bit more.
Have her email that one to me, and then have her email that one to me, and then let me see if I can do a little research on that one. It's off the top of my head. I'm lost there on that one, but it should have bloomed in 9 years for some reason or other. You'd think that if a cane got tall enough and heavy enough, it would have fallen over and it would have bloomed or something. But I'll do some research on it. Yeah, send that one to me and I'll do a little research on it.
Okay. All right. Next question is by Robert Filter. What is your favorite climber?
Oh, it probably would have to be Harlequin, that one that the one that you saw on that first slide. That's a Cordis, very, very vigorous, and it's that one that you saw on that opening slide there. We put that one here, so that's been there for close to 25 years in the ground. It produces some new basils every year, and I take an old one out, but it's an excellent rose, beautiful coloring, and it's the blooms are probably good 4.5 to 5 inches in diameter, and they're just massive blooms too. So that would have to be my favorite.
Okay. Question by Larry Peterson. What type of fertilizer is best for climbers?
Well, Larry, I would basically, the Puyallup Rose Society has a fertilizer blend that they have custom blended for us out here, which is a 15-10-10, I believe it is, and so and that's all I've ever used. I know it seems to take care of all the rose bushes that we have, and to me, a fertilizer is a fertilizer. I don't know if anything specific for climbers. It shouldn't make any. It doesn't. Not that I've ever run across. So I know there are some of those that some of those products that claim to be that have a little bit more fertilizer and insecticide systemic type things, but I don't think that makes any difference to me as far as the fertilizer, because it's taken up by the roots in a liquid form. This is why we need and as the leaves, once they're growing and they start to transpire water and out through the stomata, and then they draw up the moisture, they draw up the nutrients along with the moisture and from the soil. That seems to be just doing fine. Just having a regular granulated general purpose fertilizer. Okay.
Okay. All right. The next question is from Michelle Lynch. She says, terrific one-on-one course. What was the name of your rose on the end of your driveway, the pink one?
Well, the one on the driveway, that was, American Pillar. And the other one was I have no name for it, that white one. That was on the other side. That was from rose rustling. There's some areas over here where they've torn down old farmhouses and putting up warehouses, and we were able to get some cuttings of things, and hopefully one day I'll be able to figure out what it is. But the other one was American Pillar, that red pink one on the driveway. Okay.
Okay. Next question is from Suzanne Stahl. How far from the ground should the first horizontal laterals be placed? How much space in between the laterals?
Well, what's like I would probably put the lowest support wire, probably at least you'd want a minimum of a foot off the ground, maybe and in between. So like for you showed on that fence, which was a 5 foot, I think you had 3 wires. So say like maybe about I think they were probably the best if you're about at least a foot apart, between a foot and a half apart. Okay. So that you can have laterals that'll have 2 to 3 eyes on them. Okay. If you're closer to that, it's pretty hard to get in enough blooms before that lateral is hitting the next support one up. So just figure on a minimum of a foot, but probably a little bit better if you could go 15, 16 inches or so. Okay.
All right, next question is from Alicia. What was the rose name for the one where you grew with bamboo? It was the rose on the left where there was a succession of the other roses, a pretty pink rose.
Well, that was I'm just using the bamboo as a support, the horizontal supports for that we can, and that's harlequin on the left. And then there was Linda Campbell, that hybrid rugosa there, the red one peeking through. And then there was Fraser Morgan wrote there in the middle, kind of a big cordis giant shrub. And then there was a casino, and then go all the way down to Golden Olymp, which is another cordis climber on the right side. This program should be is being recorded. This will be available on the American Rose Society's website here probably next week sometime, and so then you can take a look at that again and see those roses. But yeah, that was I'm sure the one you're talking about is harlequin that was there on the left. Yeah, the pink one.
Okay. Next question is by Sally Parsons. I have several climbers that need to be moved. They are not well developed, but have been in the ground for 4 to 5 years. How far down should I cut them in order to transplant them?
I assume you want to. I would say just like almost in any rose that you want to climb. I'm sorry, that you want to move. Okay? I always give the answer knee high. Okay. And what you want to do is you, when you, first of all, if it's too tall, it's difficult by the time you dig it and move it and wrestling with all those canes. Plus the fact that once you put it in the ground in this new home, you want roots to grow, and it cannot support all that foliage up above if it doesn't have the roots to support it. So probably on a big climber, maybe you could go, if you get a good sized root ball, excuse me, you could probably go maybe waist high, but I wouldn't go any more than that. All you gotta do is admit to yourself, hey, once you move a rose, basically you've lost a season, of blooms. And in fact, with a climber, you're probably gonna lose. You're gonna lose more than that. You're gonna lose a couple of years because you're gonna have to, probably let some new canes grow so that you can start to arch or espalier those out as time goes on. Hope that answers that, but I have seen too many people try to move too big of a plant, and then they want to know why it dies on them. If it's been in the ground that long, the other thing I would suggest doing, when you dig on it, is by trying to dig around around the circle around the plant out the ways, a quarter at a time. Maybe drink like a quarter of it and then go to the opposite quarter, and then if you got some 3-4 days to do that, so there's not one big shock all at one time, and then water it in between every day, and then finally, because you're cutting roots as you're doing that. So yeah, moving a climber is not easy, but I would do that. Please don't do that in the middle of the summer unless you absolutely have to. Or late fall or early spring would be the time to do it. Okay.
Okay. This is going to be the final question for today by Lauren O'Neill. When training a climber to a wood fence, how far away from the fence should the wires be?
How far? Oh, the wire. Okay. Well, basically, you just put in some way to fasten the wire on, because if you have posts on that fence, just a regular screw eye, so that the wires is probably somewhere up to a inch to 2 inches away from the wall, because you're not going to have much growth behind it anyway. So it will be growing out toward the front, toward into the sun and up. So.
Okay. All right, everyone, if your question did not get asked, don't worry. We're going to give it over to Mr. Moe. He will respond back to you via email. And we're going to go ahead and close it out. But before we do, Mr. Quirkin or Ms. Summers, do you have anything you'd like to say before we close out?
This is Diane. I just want to thank John for the program today. It was really helpful for me. I know what I need to do with my climbers now in my yard. So I can't wait for spring to really come to Wisconsin and I can get to work out there. In addition, I do want to remind folks that we do have a really nice PowerPoint that was developed by our Consulting Rosarians from many of our districts across the country, where they've identified some of the favorite climbers in their areas. So we will be getting that posted along with the recording of today's program. So you'll have just some great resources that will be available for you very shortly, and we'll be sure to notify you when they're available. Thank you.
John, did you have anything?
Oh, anyway, thanks again for bearing with me on this thing. But I just wanted to get that point across to, why does a climbing rose do what it does, and just try to understand that philosophy a little bit more, about how much better a climber works if you can exfoliate them out and then get them to grow in that form. And so give it a try. I mean, I have, if you want to play with something else, for example, out here, I've got a lot of blackberries, which are all in the same family as some of the roses. And I've tried it with that. I've tried, like, take one cane, two side-by-side canes of blackberries, and tied one up on a bamboo pole so it was vertical. And then I've experimented and then exfoliated the other one out, bent it down over, and just in a matter of weeks, just the number of laterals that are growing on those things. So it's been an experiment in learning how to do some of this stuff. So I encourage everybody just to try different things, and this is how we learn all the time. Okay. Anyway, thanks for attending, and best of luck with your roses this year.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Moe, and thank you for a wonderful presentation. Thank you all for attending today. We really appreciate your support. Please check out our social media platforms, Facebook, Instagram, and also YouTube. You can just search American Rose Society, and you can see upcoming webinars or anything else that's going on with the American Rose Society. Also, go to our website, rose.org. There's a calendar at the very bottom of the page on the main page. You can see upcoming webinars there or other events happening. Again, we'd like to thank you and have a wonderful weekend. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone.